Welcome back to the channel, guys. Thank you for joining me. On today's video, I sit down with my good buddy Bradley from Wild Food Outdoors, and we kind of go over the 5 lessons learned from my Oregon Archery 2022 elk hunt. Stay tuned. Hopefully get some good feedback out of this video. And if you have any lessons that you guys want to throw out to us or advice, drop them in the comments below. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
You ready? Ready?
3, 2, 1.
You want me to start?
It's your video.
My video? Okay. Welcome, guys. Thomas from Roosevelt's Outdoors. And this is Bradley from Wild Food Outdoors. This video, we just kind of wanted to talk about pretty much the 5 things we could take away from last elk season. Kind of like the don'ts that we learned. So yeah, let's dive into it. So first thing for me, we learned the hard way multiple times was to not try to call a bull into a clearing or like a clear cut or any kind of like opening where they can see a distance. And we've also, I mean, it's possible. It's definitely possible if you follow any of the big guys on YouTube. You can see that they'll call through the openings. And this is more for Roosevelt, I think. I would assume you could call a Rocky bull across openings, pretty well. But for Roosevelt, anyway, in the Northwest here, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we got caught a couple times where we had a bull kind of in the middle of the clear cut, and we just got real excited and kind of went after it, but there wasn't really good cover.
yeah.
And we would get within 100 yards of the bull, and when they're not seeing what's bugling, and there's that much open space, then they weren't too interested.
Yeah, basically each time we had that scenario happen, the bull pushed the cows into the timber or just they all moved into the timber. There's also a second lesson learned there that when they do that, it doesn't mean that your chance is over. From talking to other people and learning firsthand, like in that situation, that if you do experience that, the best thing is to back out, maybe give it a half hour to an hour, get into the timber downwind of them if you can, and then try again. We also kind of learned, kind of a side tangent here, that you can also call a bull multiple times, Roosevelt anyway. Just because you don't necessarily get a chance at them, doesn't mean that they're going to blow out of the drainage and be gone forever. So keep that in mind. Number 2, probably one of the biggest things that we learned inadvertently, I think, is that if you hear a bugle, whether it's a response to yours or just out of nowhere, even if you think it is a person and you're like pretty certain it's a person, always make sure you find out. Because again, first-hand experience, we had a bull bugle. I think it was a respond to one of mine, and it sounded as a distant bugle, so it's kind of hard to tell anyway. But we're like, oh, there's a road right there, at least we thought. And we were like, oh, it's a person. And instead of enacting on that and just trying to figure it out right away, we pretty much looked at our maps and was like, oh, there's a road there. It's probably a person. And then 20, 30 minutes later, we were like, oh, let's just go figure out if it is a road. And we got all the way around this drainage to find out there's literally, the road that's on the map is literally non-existent. You can't even see the turnoff for it.
Yeah.
So if it was a person, they're deep in the drainage and coming up. But then we later ended up getting the bull to respond again, and he was closer, and we knew for sure it was a bull at that point. But we kind of wasted a bit of time getting to that point.
Yeah, it was sort of like, when you're not 100% sure just based on the sound, like, I mean, first of all, me being new, like everything sounded like a bull to me, just because I'm not really experienced of like differentiating between an actual bull and people. But when we weren't kind of when we were uncertain about it, and then kind of looking at the maps, it was sort of easy to talk ourselves into thinking it was a person just because of, like you were saying, the proximity of the roads and different things. And so, I think there was probably maybe 1 or 2 times where we thought it was a person, but it probably was a bull. And then there was a couple times where it did actually turn out to be a person.
Yep.
So, those are really hard to tell. And I think, if it's 50-50, you might as well just go for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about opportunity. So even if you're on the fence and you think it's a person, you get down within 100 yards, and then next thing you know, you see a bull coming to you, and it happens, and you get the shot.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. So, you're leaving cards on the table, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah. Right.
If you're not trying every bugle.
Yeah. And the one time that we did sort of mutually call in another hunter,
right.
we ended up having a great conversation with that person.
Yeah.
And, talked a lot about kind of what they were seeing, what we were seeing out there, and it ended up being a great interaction anyway.
Yep.
Just from a knowledge standpoint, with the other hunter. I mean, obviously you're not going to have that situation every single time.
Correct. Yeah.
But, I mean, you might as well just go
great.
for it.
I ended up getting the guy's number, and he actually was trying to help me out the last day I was there to try to find the bull. So
yeah,
just because there's other people around and they may screw up your hunt or whatever, don't write them off. People are genuine. We're all out there trying to fill our tags. Some are more, driven than others. But
right.
Politeness carries yourself. So
yeah.
the more polite you are, the better reaction you might get. So.
Yeah, and that one kind of ties into another one that we were talking about when, just based on the volume of the bugles that you're hearing, it's it's kind of hard to judge distance. And I think a lot of times we thought a bugle was further away than it was.
Yes, that's definitely one. We learned kind of later, towards the end of our 8-9 day hunt. Probably a little too late, but now we know. But yeah, you get a bugle and we're like, oh, it's not like he's 800-900 yards away. And then we move down the road or down the drainage and bugle and do a locator, and next thing you know, it sounds like he's only 200 yards away. It's like, well, that seems kind of odd. Well, what happens is you got terrain, breaks up the volume. We also watch, I don't know if you actually were paying attention enough, but we had a bull bugling in a clear cut at us, and I couldn't hear bugles every once in a while. Sometimes he'd be, facing right at us, and you couldn't hear it. So wind plays plays a part in it, and then terrain, but also the direction they're facing. So I'm sure if you have a bull that's 300 yards from you and it's bugling down away from you, you probably won't hear it very well. And they can hear you. That's the other thing is elk's hearing a lot better than ours. So especially mine.
Right. Yeah, and when we're bugling off the top of a ridge or something, that sound's going to carry farther from the top down than an elk is going to carry from the bottom.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And they don't always bugle super loud. I was actually watching Elk 101 video yesterday, and I won't get into details, but the bull spooked out of this clear cut on these hunters and went in the timber, and then later in the video the bull bugled again, but he bugled quiet, pretty quiet, just on the film you can hear it, but it wasn't super loud. And they're saying, oh, he's only 50 yards away, and it's like, oh, so they won't always bugle super loud. It's probably a survival thing.
Yeah.
So that's another lesson learned.
Yeah, we had one where it was we were up on a ridge, we heard a response, and just from being in that area before, we thought it was oh, he's down on the very bottom, back in the clear cut, when it turns out he was probably just 100 yards off the ridge, in his bed or whatever. So,
right, which would have been.
We ended up going sort of all the way around to the bottom, and then he ended up not being there, and it was just if we would have just went off the ridge into the timber right there, we probably would have got on it.
Yep, which leads into my next one is be decisive and go right for him. The whole season was full of hesitation, which could have resulted in possible harvest. Not saying that would have been a guarantee, but the first, I'd say even the first encounter with the bull that we had, which is on episode 2, I think, of mine, we kind of hesitated a little bit, to figure out what we're going to do to get to them, and in the long run, it cost us an opportunity, and then it happened again. I still was able to get, I think, the closest I got to that bull, the O-shit bull, was 180 yards, what I ranged him at. That point, I ran out of time, ran out of daylight, but nevertheless, like, we waited probably 15 minutes, or him and Hod 15 minutes of what to do exactly before I decided to just go straight for him. So if you get a response, get on your Onyx maps or go on or whatever you're using for maps, put a pin where you think he's at, make sure you have a good wind, and then just go for him. Don't hesitate, because elk aren't always just stationary, and they move way faster than you can no matter what. So you might wait 10 minutes, and the next thing you know, they're another 400 yards away, and you can't hear them, but they hear you, and you think they're gone. So that's a big one. Just make sure you go for it. Number 4, I would say, I think I personally, rethinking all this, learned is don't hone in on one area. Traditionally, I would scout. And when I was scouting, I'd find like a couple of little herds of elk in this one given area, like say a 20 square mile area, and I'd just stick to that the whole hunting season, and it didn't work out. Like this last year was by far the most successful season I've had personally, and what ended up happening is my original plan, kind of went out the door because of fire danger. So we just picked a spot on the map in public state land that's open, and we went there and we got lucky. We found a pretty good area. So keep your options open. So obviously, like this year, I'll probably do some more e-scouting and find a couple other places along the whole coast and use those as our plan B, C, D, whatever. So number 5, last one. Trying to think of. We kind of covered a lot actually. Anything that you...
Yeah, I mean, this one, kind of ties into the last one when we were talking about the distance, but, like, one of the things that I think that we sort of learned after the fact last year was, like, we should have been bugling, trying to locate more often.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Just given the kind of thick areas that we were hunting, thick timber, the terrain and everything, those bugles aren't carrying as far. And so, we were kind of, like... bugle once at this spot, and then then we were going like half a mile. We were going quite a ways before we would bugle again, and I think we probably could have been bugling. We should have been bugling like every couple hundred yards to be able to get our sound to where the elk might be, and then to even be able to hear them back. So I think that was another one.
Yeah, it works both ways. So like they may not be able to hear you at one spot, and then instead of going 200 yards, you go a half mile, and then you're way out of their hearing range again, or vice versa. That you could barely hear them. You go further away or whatever. We had learned that lesson too. Is after talking with some friends, they kind of were like, "Hey, you need to just locate more often." And that's when we had the O-shit bull kind of surprise us. We were down all the way to this ridge top, bugled. Nothing, went back 200 yards, bugled, nothing, went back another 200 yards, bugled, and he was only, I'm going to say now, knowing what we know now, he's probably, like you said, only 150 yards at the most in the timber below us. In that specific situation, the wind was blowing right to him, but, like that proves the point right there, and the style we were hunting, we were covering roads with vehicles, but I think it applies no matter what. If you're on foot, same thing. If not, you can even bugle more often because you're covering ground slower, but you're still covering ground. So that's a good one,
yeah. I think is that it. There was a bonus one I was just kind of thinking of, but now I'm blanking.
Yeah, I had another one, but
dang.
I guess the only other thing I would say that I took away the most from this season, outside of that stuff, is time in the woods. Like, traditionally I have set aside the same amount of time, But to be honest, I wouldn't hunt the whole 10 days because I would get bummed out, you know. And I was solo hunting, which solo hunting is a whole nother animal. Even just having Bradley there changed everything. It's just a whole nother dynamic. And you know, he's new, so he wasn't calling for me or anything. He was just graciously filming me fail constantly. But you know, I guess that wraps around failure. But you have to fail to learn. I think what happened before in years past was I was afraid of failure, of like putting all this time, money, and effort into it, or you know, not wanting to go too far away from like a camp or the truck, and worries that I get hurt, or you know, like what if I do kill a bull? You know, am I gonna be able to pack it out? At the end of the day, you'll always find a way to get it done, but you can't do it if you're afraid to fail. And so, like, a big part of it, honestly, was when you're like, hey, we need this. Let's just keep going. Let's keep going. Bugle again. Bugle again. And coming from someone that, you know, doesn't have much experience, it's your first year elk hunting, and you're learning hunting, like, that's what I needed. To where I'm like, now I'm like, okay, next year is on. We're gonna push. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like we learned a lot in that, you know, 10-day span, and obviously these are just kind of some of the highlighted lessons, some of the bigger ones, but man, it was a great time and got me hooked for sure. I got to figure out my bow situation for this next season, so yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I'm pumped. All right, thanks for watching, guys.
Leave your tips in the comments below.
Yes, I will take any and all. Thanks, guys.
Sweet.